Someone recently messaged me and requested a Regretful Wife series, and I think there would be a lot of value in sharing women's stories of marriage, whether they are regretful or not. Especially now as momentum grows within the 4B movement, the sprinkle sprinkle philosophy, and the move for women to decenter men, we will benefit from storytelling and hearing the lived experiences of women who have been in marriages and long-term relationships and have experienced firsthand the behavior, treatment, and life changes that occur when they marry, cohabitate, and center a man in their life. I think that young women especially do not realize all the insidious ways that a relationship with a man will change her and will change her daily life. So, similar to my Regretful Parent series, if you have a story that you think women would benefit from hearing, then you can DM me or send it to my email, which is in my link in bio, and I will share your story anonymously. I will never reveal your identity or your username. And I will be the only one who sees your message. You don't have to be a regretful wife or ex-wife. And I'm most interested in hearing how marriage, the reality of marriage, is different than what you were sold about marriage, the dream you were sold. How has marriage changed you, and what did you realize was expected of you once you became married? How has it changed the way that you view relationships and men? And what are the mistakes that you made that you wouldn't repeat if you could do it again? What are all the little ways that your life changed that you never expected? And what do you wish people had told you about marriage before you went into it? My husband and I have a star-crossed love story, one he tells often, at least once a month, to anyone who will listen, whether or not they have heard it before. Sometimes when he is telling the story, I will chime in and contribute details, corroborating evidence. More often, though, I will stay quiet, annoyed at his omissions and embellishments, all the ways he has rewritten the story over the years, but mostly sad at how drastically different the lived reality of our life is from the story he tells with so much animation, reinforcing our mythology as if by retelling the story to others, he can convince us both that it is still true. It is true that we fell madly in love. I have never, before or since, been so completely, utterly, head over heels in love with someone. It is true that within a week after our first kiss, we were talking marriage, babies, and grandchildren. In that first month, he performed a spontaneous monologue on a public stage about our falling in love. I still have the recording and watch it maybe once a year. It's true that our connection was and still is extremely powerful, that the best versions of our dreams are still incredibly in sync, that our love is profound. It is also true that 12 years after that fateful spring, I am in so many ways very unhappy, full of regret, and longing for something different. What I didn't understand at the time was that it was his collection of red flags that would bloom into the sinking regret that I feel every day now. The things I believed he would grow out of, or that I overlooked or chose to accept because I loved him so much. His daily chaos, his chronic brokenness, his absolutely toxic relationship to money, his complete lack of family, his inability to take responsibility for his part in any problem, his constant playing the victim, his inability to function as a normal adult, his inability to grow or heal in any of the above dynamics because he refused to ever admit there's anything wrong with him, our stunted communication about anything hard in our relationship, the way I have learned not to trust him to take care of me or our family in just about every situation. The fact that I have always known that as much as he loves me, that he is not actually attracted to me. The way I am no longer attracted to him because I feel so unsafe with him. The way I fantasize about meeting a nice, normal guy with nice shoes and a 401k, who knows how to cook and just works a job instead of ceaselessly chasing crazy dreams. All because I bucked the norm, because I wanted a different life than they could imagine, because I loved him and I wanted to believe in him. And now as a mom and almost 40, I wish I had made a smart choice, a practical choice. A man who can pay for groceries without his card getting declined. A man who doesn't expect me to deal with 100% of our financial and logistical and practical life. Over the years, at every step of intertwining our lives, I would have crippling anxiety, because after we took each step, I knew it would be that much harder to extricate myself. When we moved in together, bought a house only in my name because his finances are fucked, and finally when we had a kid. Now that we have our son, I know that I am bound to him forever, no matter what. I can't ever say that I regret our beautiful boy, but parenting with him is harder than I could have ever imagined, and I imagined it would be really fucking hard. The other night, I was watching a romantic movie and realized that I was watching the passionate kissing scenes like a detached anthropologist. I couldn't remember what it felt like to feel turned on, to want to have sex, to feel that kind of passion and fire. I know that I am missing out on a big part of life by being in a completely sexless marriage, but I have no idea what it would take to reconnect with him in that way. And the honest truth is that I am repulsed by the idea of trying. I love my husband, and even though I have painted a pretty foul portrait of him here, he really is a remarkable, beautiful man, as difficult as it is to be married to him. I cannot consciously imagine a life apart from him, and I also know that that is precisely what I long for. If I could go back in time, I would beg myself to not get married. At 25, I couldn't believe my luck finding someone who matched me so perfectly. I now realize he was just reflecting my own personality back to me in an effort to win me over. Boy, did it work. After marriage, it was like a switch flipped. It started in small ways, like that he wouldn't buy groceries or cook because he was too busy with work. I also worked and made more money, but thought he needed to learn because he hadn't been taught to take care of himself. I actually blamed his mom. When I cooked, he suddenly no longer did dishes, as he used to when we were dating, instead claiming it was my mess I had created. Lord. I was shocked and thought we just had to learn to communicate better. It only got worse after kids. Somehow he slowly pulled away until the entire weight of the house was my responsibility, even though I also worked part-time and had babies to care for. When I respectfully attempted to address these issues with him, he would blow up in anger and then make it my fault for how I communicated the issues. I don't know how I bought that BS, but I did, and was desperate to improve myself. I read all the books and went to therapy. I wish I would have just left. Now I have 3 small children and cannot afford to leave. I have no support system. He's not a monster, and he's faithful and a pretty good dad. Just an absolute worthless partner who benefits from my labor and makes every aspect of my life harder. I wish I had known how little women gain from marriage and how much men take and take, even the good ones. He really fooled me, and I feel like it's still all my fault for choosing him and putting myself in this financial situation. My husband and I met years before we started dating. I moved away, lived a wild life, got a high-powered job, and eventually we reconnected and started dating. My husband comes from money, and I don't, but I was raised to be fiercely independent. I was taught by my dad to never give anyone financial control over your life. Additionally, I liked being by myself. I enjoy being alone. I enjoy being without my husband. I cannot stand being together 24/7. My husband had a lot of friends when we started dating, and we had a very active social life. Fitness is incredibly important to me, and it was to him as well. It was one of the things we had most in common. Slowly, everything started to change. He stopped eating healthy, stopped wanting to go do things with people, stopped going to the gym, and now has really stopped leaving the house except when we travel. I will say we travel a lot, but if it wasn't for that, he would go months without leaving our home. He even works remotely, as do I. I started working remotely 5 years before him. When the pandemic started, he moved many of the jobs within his company to a remote status and never changed them back. While the pandemic changed life for a lot of people, it didn't change anything for him. He didn't leave the house before that. And anytime I would make plans, he would guilt me. If I made plans to go hiking with a friend, it was, well, I thought we could do something that day. If I planned a girls' trip, it was, well, I would rather spend my vacation time with you than other people. If I planned drinks, he would say I made reservations for us. It was funny, he never mentioned that until he knew I had plans with someone else. One of the biggest points of contention in our relationship is his health. His mom died from diabetes at 35. His grandfather had a heart attack at 55. His uncle from diabetes at 58. He has always been a bigger guy, but he has gained probably 200 pounds in the last few years and gets winded walking from the living room to the kitchen. His weight now affects every decision we make. We have to fly first class, first world problem, I know. because he doesn't fit in airplane seats. The only thing he wants to do is eat and watch TV. I'm a marathon runner, a triathlete, and when we travel, he won't do active things and many things he can't do because he is too large. I feel so smothered and alone. He has alienated me from everyone. I was a top-level executive at a toxic company and finally left last year after years of verbal abuse from a fellow executive. Though I didn't have anything lined up, we are financially sound, but he is trying to use that as a way to control me as well. I am being headhunted for a top-level job, but it is hybrid and requires me to go into an office a couple days a week. As much as I never wanted to go back into an office, I almost welcome it to get away from my husband and breathe. He is trying to manipulate me into thinking I don't want the job, and it isn't a good fit because it isn't what he wants. And I truly think because he feels he would lose some of the control he has over me if I leave the house for work. I went from being an independent woman to being friendless with an insecure, controlling husband who would choose food over me at the drop of a hat. I know people will say I am cruel and unfair to discuss his weight, but until you have been in a relationship with someone who would choose food over you, talks of nothing else, and gets winded standing up while you run marathons, you are truly in no place to judge me here. I am watching my husband eat himself to death, but if I say something, I am cruel and judgmental, according to him. If I encourage him to work out, he gets defensive and tells me to mind my own business. If I ask him to walk the dogs with me, he rolls his eyes. We don't have sex. I don't even think he can have sex at this point. Not to mention, there is a smell about him that is constant because he doesn't seem to get clean due to his size. I also don't think he truly sees how much weight he has gained. I think he's in denial of how unhealthy he has become. I have an eating disorder, and I have since I was 11, but I can't enjoy anything about food anymore. His toxic and unhealthy obsession with food has made me resent it. The first thing he thinks about in the morning is food. The only thing he cares about on vacation is food. It consumes him and it makes me angry. There is more to life than food, but to him, it is his whole life. I know one of the reasons he is so insecure and controlling is because of his weight. I know he doesn't leave the house because of his weight, but also because of his lazy tendencies. He likes the easy things. I know all of that. But controlling my life and making me a prisoner in our marriage because he doesn't have the willpower to better himself is wrong. And what's worse is he has emotionally beaten me down to the point where I don't even know how to argue with him or fight back anymore. And the people around him would all see me as the problem. But if I make plans to do something, I have to hear about it for weeks, and it's exhausting. I'm exhausted. I've quite literally become his puppet. My dad recently passed away, and I know he is looking down on me, disappointed to see who I've become at the hands of this man who is not worthy of me, but who has made me into his weak little puppet. I miss myself. I miss having a life. I miss not getting severe anxiety just telling my husband that I'm going to lunch with a friend for fear he will berate me and guilt me to the point of exhaustion. People say they are jealous of us because we travel so much, and I almost laugh in their faces. All I want to do is have a normal conversation with other adults and do more than watch television. I look at our friends who do things and live normal lives, and it makes me so sad and angry at who I've become. I hate what my life has become and who my husband has molded me into because of who he has allowed himself to become. I was raised by my baby boomer grandparents. My parents were teen parents that got married too young and ended up getting divorced when I was young. My whole life, my grandmother told me the same thing over and over. Men are dogs, they're never going to change, so never trust them. Looking back, it's kind of funny that she said that because she was married to my grandpa for 40 years. As I became a teenager, she became the voice in the back of my head, telling me men are dogs. I eventually ended up dating a guy from the ages of 14 to 21. He ended up being everything she said he would be. A cheater, liar, manipulator, and emotional abuser. Of course, I never let my grandmother know all of these things were going on until the very end, and I had to hear the regretful words of, "I told you so." After breaking up with my ex, I took a spell of being single up until I was about 22 when I had a very tragic car accident. The accident was pretty horrible. I wound up in the hospital for 40 days with 2 broken legs and entire broken left arm, a fractured back, and a fractured pelvis. I had no damage to my face. During my miserable time after the accident, my grandma used to reiterate that no man was going to love me this way, so I might as well get used to being single. That same thing replayed in my head day after day. It made me feel so very low about myself. I ended up moving back home with my bio mother, and she really helped me change my mindset about the whole men or dogs thing. When I was 23, and about 2 years after my breakup with my ex, I met a guy online. Even though I had been around people who overall changed my mindset about men being horrible, that small voice in the back of my head still had the thought. After pushing down that thought and getting to know my now husband, it was the best decision I ever made. He is the opposite of what my grandma told me growing up. He did not know me before my accident, so the only person that he knew was the broken version. He never once judged me for my inability to do things. On the outside, especially if I am wearing pants and a sweater, you would have no idea that there was anything different about me. My husband has showed me what true unconditional love is. He has been with me through countless surgeries, doctors, appointments, and very rough days. He has never once made me feel like I am less than or unable to be loved because of my situation. He and my mother are the ones that helped me become comfortable with the body that I have now. I used to be so insecure about wearing shorts or a tank top because you could see how bad my scars are, and I was so tired of people staring. Over the years, he has taught me self-confidence, and that if people are staring, it's just because they are ignorant, and it's not their fault that nobody taught them better. Today, we have a little 3-year-old boy, and he is the most amazing father. He shows up to all of the events, pulls his weight as a parent, wakes up with our child when he was a baby and a toddler. We have both come from very broken homes, and he has shown me and our son what it is to be truly and unconditionally loved. The point of my story is to say that yes, there are some men that are horrible and do awful things to women, but there are good guys out there. There are men out there that are going to accept you and be there for you emotionally, physically, and be everything that you could possibly need. We have grown so much in our 5 years of marriage. I can truly say that not all men are dogs. There is so much more to the story, but I cannot express in words the love and affection that this man has brought into my life. I truly don't know where I would be without him. I just want women to know that there are men out there that will love you no matter what, and not all marriage is bad. There are good ones. My story began as a young girl in the 90s growing up under purity culture. Girls growing up in the church during this time, and even now, are taught that sex is for marriage only, and being a godly wife and mother is your greatest calling. Growing up under this belief system, I also felt uncomfortable with my sexuality, especially throughout college, where I ended up having sex, but then getting right with the Lord again, and vowing celibacy until marriage. With this mindset after college, I met a good enough man who was 8 years older than me with a somewhat stable job. He wasn't like the college boys pushing for sex or ghosting without reason. He was active in a local fundamentalist church, and after only 4 months of dating, we were engaged. After 8 months, we were married. Looking back, I don't know how anyone in my family had no concerns. We, of course, didn't have sex until our wedding night. The sex was less than satisfying, and my husband almost immediately after the honeymoon put all his focus into work. Due to birth control making me sick, I was pregnant 3 months into the marriage. Many nights I would go to bed alone and lonely, as he preferred to fall asleep on the couch. After my son was born, I put my energy into being a mother and got my emotional needs met through loving my son. I was pregnant again after a year and had a miscarriage. I had only wanted 2 children, but after the miscarriage, I had a deep sadness and ended up getting pregnant with twin boys. I loved the boys, and being busy and exhausted really kept me from even caring how detached my husband was. When I would ask for help, he would say things like, "What would you do if I wasn't here?" Or, "Oh, did the twins sleep through the night?" When the twins were 2, I had my youngest son, so I had 4 sons under 5. I found my purpose in mothering, and of course the women at church called me Superwoman. I also completed my master's in clinical mental health during that time. Fast forward 17 years, I could no longer pretend that being lonely in an unbalanced partnership was enough. I deconstructed my belief system related to much of the toxic patriarchal teachings that had been forced upon me my entire life. With so many other revelations about myself, I am now in the process of getting divorced, even though it's financially difficult. There is no greater lonely I have known than being married and alone. My hope is that young women in the church will see through the lie that marriage is the only path to happiness and that their bodies are theirs, not their future husbands. I grew up without any models of a healthy marriage. My parents divorced when I was 12 and had a lot of conflict before that. My mother dated a slew of men she continued to have conflict with. My sister married an abusive man and divorced young. So I had no sugarcoating when it came to my marriage expectations. I figured I would either stay single or have a shitty husband. In my 20s, I dated men who were fine, but not inspirational. I definitely would change myself to benefit them, adjust my values, pretend like I was fine with their behaviors when I wasn't to avoid conflict. Lots of them wanted/needed a mom and couldn't do anything for themselves. Besides that, I lived an amazing, full life. I traveled lots and had many friends. And then when I was 27, I met my husband. We dated for a year, went our separate ways because we were too young. We got back together when I was 32. After that time apart and the recommitting to each other, my life has been nothing short of magic. We married when I was 35, had our son when I was 36. He is the most wonderful, amazing, steadfast partner. He treats me like a partner and a queen. We share all parenting and household work. We both work full-time, and we both take on the home tasks fully, so that we don't fall into the trap of moms carrying the biggest mental load in the home. He is a wonderful father, a wonderful friend, the best husband. I get butterflies when I see him. Our romance and sex life is still amazing. He's kind to my friends, to my family. We built a home together with so much love and laughter and respect for each other. We both make sure we take care of ourselves by going to therapy and doing things we need to have a strong relationship. I know not everyone gets to be this lucky, but I do think there was something about our time apart and our work on ourselves, our recommitment, and our shared values that make our foundations so strong. I often say this. I've had so many amazing days in my 20s and early 30s, but any perfect day, for example, on a trip with friends, is nothing in comparison to a Sunday morning laughing in bed with my husband and toddler. It literally hurts my heart to even think about it because I feel so lucky. Getting married was the worst decision of my life. I got married at 21, and now at 25, I realize what a mistake I made. I'm an educated professional with multiple degrees, while my husband only has a high school diploma. Somehow, his entry-level job is still more important. His hobbies are more important. His time is more important. His preferences hold more weight. Everything is centered around him. I want a divorce, but I don't want to split time with our child with him. He cuts every corner possible while parenting, and I'm worried about the sort of care my child would receive while with him alone. I live with this excruciating knowledge that I settled, and it's only made my life worse. Because of his lack of career prospects, I'm the breadwinner, the primary household manager, the default parent, and the list goes on. I've told him ad nauseum how all of this impacts me, but it's clear he doesn't care. I'm but a star in his orbit, and that's what he expects in perpetuity. The best advice I can give young women is do not marry a man unless you're willing to take care of him, almost like a mother cares for a child. I sit and daydream about how much easier my life would be if he wasn't in it, single motherhood and all. I regret being someone's wife for 29 years. A whirlwind start, I was a single mom, 22, and independent. I met him, 29, and I was pregnant in 3 months and married and in a house within a year. I had quit my job to stay home and couldn't make enough per hour to pay for daycare, especially after the next 2 kids. He was going through a bankruptcy when we met, so everything needed to be in my name. He started a business with his brother early on that did not make it, so he started his own in my name as owner because of the bankruptcy. He was a very hard worker and had a job going most of the time. The domestic labor and 4 kids, schedules, well, everything else was mine to figure out. He would do projects at home, hold the baby if I needed a shower, or watch them so I could go get groceries. He was the fun dad that did walks and bikes, camping while I didn't want to, except that was the only me time I had and was mind-boggling burnt to toast tired, to the bone tired. 4 kids, sports, extracurriculars, dog, cats, housework, homework, rivalry, and thinking I had to be Martha Stewart in the kitchen and home. I don't regret kids, although I know they regret having me as their mom by now, as I'm a fraction of a human. I regret not having loved myself enough to know I deserved to be celebrated on special occasions, not been left to care for absolutely everything, even after birth every time. I regret doing all of this while chronically ill, in severe pain, and undiagnosed ADHD. The business in my name doesn't mean my Social Security is paid into, or there weren't hidden liens on my house, or that my bank account wouldn't be garnished without my knowledge because of extensive tax bills that were paid. My divorce declaring he has to pay the past tax debt doesn't protect me at all from the IRS collections or the state. The lies I kept believing until mediation, when the adults in the room told me to open my eyes and stop believing them. I regret that I loved him even as I left, when it's quite clear that this husband of mine never even liked me. He hid his alcoholism. He told me our daughter didn't love me and that his family hated me. He was mad I never came back to work on things because all he wanted was a partner. He was stonewalling the remodel in our home for 3 years, a construction zone. I'm disabled pretty badly after burnout, and he's already said he won't pay support forever. He's not yet paid the rest of the court order, and I now have to pay an attorney for that. I slid in on fumes, lost most of my friends, and stayed to myself and my therapist mostly. I feel like if we parented more together and shared the load of work in the home and with the kids, maybe I would have been able to sneak more joy in there too and have something left for me. I raised a family of 6 in my dumpster fire of conditions. I did this with very little help other than monetarily. Now that I've left, I do feel entitled to that support. 29 years is a long time to not get paid. He acquired no retirement. I regret quitting my job to be someone's wife because he got to go to work in autonomy and come home to a kept house and a family and sit and enjoy himself like his life never changed. As a mom, we know the work didn't end for us. And now, after 29 years, I live in a back bedroom at my mom's with nothing but my dog. Non-regretful life here. My husband and I are both 34 years old and have been married for 5 years, together for 13, and we have chosen not to have children. My husband and I are complete opposites. He's logic-based and I'm emotion-based. He's an introvert and I'm an extrovert. He loves sticking to the comforts of home and I love to travel. It hasn't always been easy navigating these differences, especially in the early days. We were very young and I was not equipped to deal with conflict. I needed freedom and he was focused on responsibility. We were raised very differently. My childhood was traumatic. My mother was addicted to opiates and had full custody of me until I was 13. She passed when I was 14. My husband had a stable childhood, living in a brand new house in a neighborhood with all his friends. I just didn't have the tools that he had. I was explosive and lost in this world, and he was so grounded. It was hard not to feel as though any issues in our relationship weren't exclusively my fault, and therefore that I didn't deserve him. He never gave up on me. He showed me how to communicate. He provided me a different perspective to view the world from, and he pushed me to become the best version of myself. He led by example. He was always doing everything he could to better himself, shifting his perspective to see my point of view. As I mentioned, he is very logical, but even when he doesn't understand my emotions, he acknowledges that they are real for me. As the years have passed, we have only gotten stronger, more in love, more supportive of each other, better at loving each other. We often look at our life and say how lucky we are to have each other. We are so sad when people say that marriage is hard, because it's never marriage that's hard. It's the willingness to work on yourself. If you become the most authentic, empowered, and healed version of yourself, everything else will fall into place. I used to resent that it took so long for my husband to propose, but now I look back with gratitude. We had a long time to learn about each other and to make sure that as we were growing up, we were growing in the same direction. We built a home, got a dog. I went back to school. He lost a parent. And we had weathered the storms with ease, leaning on each other. Marriage has grounded me. My husband is the best person I know. He makes me feel appreciated and loved and, in a sense, given me a purpose in life. I love taking care of our home. I love making dinner and packing his lunch. I love planning for our future goals together. It may sound like I'm a traditional wife, living to take care of my man, but I assure you, I am out with friends at least twice a week and on girls' trips at least twice a year. I am independent and have my own things going, and so does he. That's important. We have to be whole as individuals. One person cannot take on the sole responsibility for your happiness. If marriage seriously feels like work, like a daily grind you're trudging through, it's probably not a relationship you should be in. I think oftentimes the notion that marriage is hard is what keeps people in unhappy relationships. Marriage should feel like a happy union. It should feel strong and secure. Your partner should feel like your best friend. It should illuminate all the best parts of your life. I am so happy to be married and so grateful to have found such a great love. I am currently divorcing my husband of 8 years. I have learned to never see someone as their potential or what they say they will do. Only see them as who they are now and what they do now. For the entirety of our marriage, I have paid for his lifestyle and paid almost all of the bills while he started a small business as a photographer. I started a Roth IRA for him and invested in it, thinking it would help us retire together. I worked 60-hour weeks, either from working full-time while in grad school or working a job so intense that the stress made my hair fall out and I stopped getting periods for a while. Meanwhile, he worked about 1 job a month, sometimes 2, while somehow staying busy around 10 hours a week doing other work for his business. He didn't have a marketing plan or much of a social media presence, so I'm not sure what he was doing. When my body started to shut down from stress, his solution was for me to quit my job and to live off my savings while I looked for another job, which he did not contribute to. I didn't feel comfortable with that. In retrospect, he was working so little that he should have taken on a part-time job to support us, but he said that would hurt his career as a photographer. I'm not sure how that is true, given that he worked so few hours each week. When I tried to get him to meet with me monthly to discuss budgeting and finances, he refused for years. He said we made too much money for us to need a budget. I made $70,000, and I don't know how much he made at that time, probably around $20,000 before expenses. He said it would be difficult for him to bring up all of his financial details and would take him hours, and why couldn't I just trust him? So we never had honest financial discussions. When I asked for a divorce, it came out that he had $28,000 in business expenses he hid from me. I have no idea what he could have spent that much money on. He also had $11,000 in credit card debt, which he said was my fault because he bought me Christmas presents and because he bought some of the groceries, which were expensive because I prefer oat milk, he said. He went to Europe for fun without me 3 times that year, but never considered that as financially irresponsible or a contributor to his debt. In addition, he would physically hurt me during sex. He was too large, but changing how he had sex so as not to hurt me was inconvenient for him. So he carried on. When I matured enough to tell him it hurt, he blamed me, said it was my fault, and that I should see a doctor because no other woman said it hurt. I would grimace and push back from the pain to try to keep him from going in all the way. Instead of being grateful that I would have sex with him, he once said in anger, "Why would I ever enjoy having sex with you? All you do is lay there." He kept trying to pressure me into having group sex, even though he knew I didn't want to. Whenever I tried to tell him something he did hurt my feelings, he'd either deny that it ever happened or said I was overreacting and it wasn't that bad. Or if it was that bad, like the time he got inches from my face to yell at me, it was my fault that he did it because I made him angry. If he was upset from an argument and therefore didn't work for weeks afterwards or performed poorly at work, then that was my fault too. He'd get so angry he'd go and stay at a hotel several days a month to get away from me, when I begged him not to because we couldn't afford it. He was diagnosed decades ago with bipolar. but refuses to take medicine or treatment. When I asked for a divorce, he first said I was too mentally unwell to make major life decisions. Then he said I'm perfect for him. Then he said it was a financially inconvenient time for a divorce, and why couldn't I have asked for it in August instead? I have had little contact with him, have been kind, and have begrudgingly given him everything he wants. The retirement account I made for him and a car I paid $18,000 on. He says he could be homeless without these. I just want the divorce to be clean, fast, and over. Never again will I be generous with a man. I'll never expect anything better than what they show me in the present. He promised his business would be successful, but never put enough work into it and always had an excuse or would blame it on someone else. And I'll keep in mind that just because someone loves me and isn't trying to hurt me doesn't mean they aren't hurting or exploiting me. Me wanting to leave is a good enough reason to leave. I am already so much happier now that he's gone. I am currently 27. I married a man who is now 38. We met when I was 22 and he was 32. Almost everyone was okay with our age difference, and I still don't see that as the biggest issue. We dated for about 3 years before he proposed, and we were living together for about a year and a half. A few months before our wedding, he lost his job. We were making about the same income, so it was really tough living on half our yearly salary. He fell into a complete depression, and I felt so alone, working so hard, paying all the bills, and doing most of the cleaning. Our wedding came, and it was beautiful and so perfect. We had our honeymoon, which was fantastic. A few weeks later, we were invited to a pool barbecue from a couple friends I work with. He chose what I wore and made rules for me to follow while we were there. I was pretty thrown off, but always knew him to be slightly jealous, but never anything close to that. As we were leaving, he was pretty drunk, and I was driving home as I was sober. He started screaming at me, hitting the dashboard and saying I didn't follow his rules, when I had. His rules included staying where he could see me and other little things like that. I was scared as I was driving down a mountain in the dark. I was crying and he was still yelling. We got home and I didn't talk to him for the rest of the night. He then started telling me he wanted to audit my phone, which I let him. There was nothing on it because I have never been anything other than faithful. I was invited to play cornhole with a couple of friends. He turned his location off and showed up to the bar I was at to surprise me, but was just seeing if I was doing anything wrong. As we finally went to leave, he went to check my phone again. I decided enough was enough. I told him I wanted a divorce and went to my parents. I stayed there a couple of nights, then realized he was using my iPad at the home we shared to read my messages to my friend. I went back, took my iPad, and left again. Finally, I decided to go back to the home as I was paying the rent and told him I did not want to be with him anymore, but I was staying in the home. In the meantime, he was in major makeup mode, trying to be the world's best husband, doing all the cooking, cleaning, finally starting to go to therapy, going to the gym. He got a new job. He brought me flowers and little gifts, etc. I decided to find a new apartment alone and moved out. He had to move in with his mom as he wasn't making much at the new job. He was consistent on all these changes he was making and was much less jealous. He kept this up for 6 months, and I thought he finally got the wake-up call he needed and was making permanent changes. I let him move in with me, and you guessed it, little by little, he stopped doing all the positive changes. He barely does any cleaning, he no longer goes to the gym, and he stopped therapy. We're still married, but I wish I had listened to my gut because I'm so terrified he's going to completely go back to his old self. I had so many people there for me when I decided to leave, but I feel I'm in too deep and I can't do this to everyone again, after advocating for him when he was doing better and explaining to people why I decided to take him back. I feel like a hypocrite and I'm so irrationally angry with myself every day. I just hope someone who needs to hear this does. Even if it's more than a few months, makeup mode goes away and you're left cleaning up the mess time and time again. I was in an abusive relationship with my husband, but I didn't know it was abusive until recently. I stumbled across a TikTok account at statute.matcher that has a free AI app, statutematcher.org, that allows you to know if any laws are broken from the situation you're in. To my surprise, my husband has been domestically abusing me, and at least 3 criminal statutes were violated based on my interaction with the app. I had suspected that I was in an abusive relationship, but I could never put my finger on it. I thought it was just a bad marriage. Once I knew the criminal statute that represented the abuse I suffered, I had the confidence to leave. I grabbed our 3 kids, left, and reported the abuse to police with the statute codes. He's now being sent to the prosecutor for felony domestic violence charges. I did not intend for things to go this far. I had asked him countless times to stop abusing me. I regret where I am. I now have 3 kids, and I am by myself with a husband who's going to be prosecuted for felony charges. But at least the kids and I are safe. And I did verify the information she shares, and so wanted to share this on this TikTok. On TikTok, the account is at statute.finder, and as she says, the website is statutematcher.org. Asking you to please share my story. I desperately need women in their early 20s to hear this, as it's very important. My husband and I met when I was 22. We were both new hires. He was 30 at the time, and he pursued me pretty quickly. The age gap was concerning to a few people who were close to me, but I wasn't interested in hearing what they had to say. He had just gotten out of a fling, as he called it. I didn't ask many questions because he was constantly talking down upon her. Being young and naive, I didn't see that as a character flaw on his end and let it slide. He proposed a little after 1 year of dating. A few months later, we moved and purchased our own home. It was complete bliss for about 10 months until I found out we were expecting 2 months before our wedding. He was very angered by this, saying he was ashamed to have a shotgun wedding and I was not to tell a single soul, including my parents. I had no clue where this was coming from. Neither of us are religious, and we both talked about wanting children plenty of times, so I agreed we would keep it quiet until we came back from our honeymoon and I'd be in my 2nd trimester. I had a wonderful pregnancy. I gave birth to our baby girl, and the switch flipped. He would come home screaming, which made the baby scream as well. He would come home late, so naturally I thought he was having an affair. We used to split chores, and he completely stopped everything. I was basically a single mother. He told me he hated the way I looked, despite being only 10 pounds away from my pre-pregnancy weight. I lost it so fast from stress. He would go days without speaking to me, even though we were sleeping in the same bed. The final count was 17 days of silence. He is the most hands-off, lazy father in the world and only shows our pets affection. I finally had enough and served him papers, and he's taking his sweet time signing them. I just ask every woman in her early 20s dating a man who is 8 to 10 plus years older to please sit and ask yourself, why is he single? And why is he looking for someone so much younger? Part of my life might sound like a dream come true for many young women, which is why it is ironic that my marriage makes me so unhappy, and I have no doubt that I would feel more peace and joy if I were peacefully divorced. When my husband and I married 15 years ago, we had a combined net worth of maybe $30,000, and now our net worth is around $9 million. When I met him, I was working full-time, but my salary as a teacher began to seem silly when compared to his earnings owning a law firm. So I started my journey as a stay-at-home mom about 9 years ago. He has never once, in 15 years, criticized me about anything I purchased, asked why the credit card was so high, etc. We have millions in shared accounts and property, so he is not trying to screw me financially if we were ever to divorce. He is one of the most financially generous people that I have ever known. I could walk into the Louis Vuitton store and buy a new bag and he would not care. But the sacrifice for this financial freedom is enormous. He has major childhood demons, abandonment by his dad, an absent mom, being shuffled to relatives when he wasn't convenient for his mom, etc. In my opinion is that this has led to him only feeling self-worth and valuable by career accomplishments. He completely refuses to get therapy, says he doesn't have time and doesn't need it, and he is not open to working less. He says that he lives for his kids, but you would never know that if you lived with him. He is a total workaholic and runs an incredibly stressful litigation practice, which often leaves his tank on empty for his friends and family. He is not a bad dad, husband, or friend, but when he is home, he is so zoned out from being stressed constantly with work that he just does not really interact with me or our kids very much. He never makes time to go to the kids' sports games. He isn't even always at their birthday parties if he has a trial coming up or a case deadline. He cannot ever say no to more business, but he silently says no to his wife and kids constantly. When he is home, if things with a big case are not going well or other stressful things are happening at work, he can be so grumpy sometimes that none of us encourage him to come out of the bedroom. Because when he does, we never know when he is going to snap at us. Never physically aggressive, just grumpy. Other times, he is in a fine mood. He is not a bear all of the time. We used to have other couple and family friends, but have lost most of them over the years because he does not make much time for anything except work. So why not divorce? It is so complicated. He is faithful to me and he is generous, loyal, hardworking, and stable for me and our kids. I know that he is working so hard because 1, it gives him self-worth that he lacks inherently due to his childhood, and 2, he is determined to build generational wealth for our kids. But I feel like he is missing so much of their childhood, and I am sadly missing out on a companion. I take walks alone in our neighborhood and nod or wave at couples walking together. I sit alone in the stands of my son's baseball games, and am so jealous of the carefree-looking couples just sitting together cheering for their 5th grader's big hit, or rolling their eyes that a strike was called for a ball. About 90% of the time, when we go out to eat, it is just me and the kids because he is still at work. And yes, he is actually working, no girlfriend. He says he will retire in 5 years, and I am 95% sure that he will. But by that time, 2 of our 3 kids will be college-aged. On the rare occasion that he is actually able to relax for short bursts of time on vacation, he is pleasant and the man I fell in love with. So I feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it's 5 years away. I feel like I need one-sided marital therapy to keep me in this unfulfilling marriage for 5 more years until he is retired and relieved of his enormous daily stress. If I divorced him now, some other woman would get the best of him for decades after he retires in 5 years. So I stay. I am a 29-year-old female who has been with my husband for 9 years, coming up on our 3-year wedding anniversary. We met when I was 21, he was 25, and we were both in the last year of college. I had only spent 6 months of my adult life not in a relationship and thought I knew who I was and what I wanted in a partner. I was immediately drawn to his intelligence and sense of adventure. I am now contemplating divorce. We have lived in several states together, moved to a different country for a year, and moved up to Alaska last year for him to pursue his passion despite it taking a significant toll on our finances and removing me further from my family. Yes, I wanted adventure and not to settle physically in one place, but all these moves have been compromises, and neither of us are truly getting what we want out of them. Because I found my husband so young, I have never had the space or time to figure out who I am and what I want. There is always this influence intercepting my decision-making, and I find myself settling for jobs and opportunities that are just okay and not fully satisfying. As we are growing older, I feel like we have grown apart. We are wildly different people, and the love that we once had is not the same, if there at all. I feel like all my good years are behind me, and that it's too late to start over. I don't believe that there is a rubric or a checklist of qualities for finding your partner, but I feel like I was not ready to commit so fully to someone without spending time figuring out what I want to do. I didn't listen to the advice of finding yourself first, and I've never felt so lost and isolated. I want to assure the person that wrote this that 29 is not too late to start over, and your best years are definitely not behind you. Your best years are ahead of you. I can assure you of that. And I can also tell you that as you grow and age, who you are and what you want will continue to change and evolve. So that's going to be a moving target that you're going to have to keep figuring out every decade. It's never going to stop changing. You are going to keep changing. So you're going to have to do that work of figuring out who you are and what you want continuously through your whole life, whether or not you have a partner. So you can start doing that now. You can be married and do that now. You can divorce and do that now, but you can do it and you have plenty of time. You are still so young. I'm so glad I saw your video. I've been with my husband 18 years. The last few years have been a serious struggle as I'm becoming more self-aware and in turn becoming more relationship aware. Today, reflecting my thoughts, I realized my husband came in so strong in the beginning because I was a super strong, hyper-independent woman. I didn't need him. I wanted him. He broke down all my walls to prove to me that he could be trusted. He would be loyal. He would show up for me. And when I allowed myself to be vulnerable and believe him and soften, he stopped. The more I needed, the less he gave. The more I wanted, the harder he pulled back. 18 years later, we are a shell of what once was, and I have held onto that version of him for so long, knowing the man he is capable of being. But I started realizing he's not coming back. It's taken me years to come to terms with this. It has wrecked me mentally and emotionally and destroyed my confidence. I am not that hyper-independent, I can do it myself woman I was 3 kids ago. I don't want to be her. I want to be the woman I was promised I could be, but I can't be her anymore. I've been asked by several people for my thoughts and opinion on Ballerina Farm and the article that came out in the Times not too long ago. And I do want to share, I do have lots of thoughts and opinions, and I do want to share those with you, but I wanted to make it into an episode of the podcast, so that's what I'm doing. But I wanted to share a few clips of the episode here with you so that you can get an idea of what I'm going to talk about, and you can go listen to the podcast to hear the rest. Since the publishing of Megan Agnew's pieces in the Times, I have been asked via TikTok comments and messages for my thoughts on Tradwives and more specifically Hannah Nealman and Ballerina Farm. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I want to focus on 3 main points. The first is that Tradwives are performers running a business. The second is that the role of fundamentalist Christianity must be examined in any conversation about Tradwives. And the third is feminism is not Hannah Nealman's choice to be a Tradwife. Let's get into it. The Tradwife lifestyle, as portrayed on social media, is not a lifestyle. It is a performance, and it is a business. In fact, the Tradwife lifestyle is such a performance for profit that we shouldn't even refer to it as a lifestyle. We should call it Tradwife performance or Tradwife business. Everything that I'm going to talk about on this topic needs to be viewed through this lens. If we don't recognize and acknowledge that Tradwife content exists for financial profit and religious benefit, then it's pointless to even entertain a discussion about this topic. So much of the way motherhood is represented on social media is performative, but the people performing and the people viewing pretend that it's not a performance. And that's true for non-Tradwife content too. The difference with Tradwife content and the reason that it's so dangerous for women, especially young women, are the ulterior motives lurking behind it. 37 female, regret getting married. My husband, 36 male, and I dated for a year before we got engaged and got married a year later. He portrayed himself as a loving, kind, quiet, and driven individual. That persona slowly began to fall away over the years and 2 children later. I realized he wasn't depressed at all or trying to get back to the man he was. He never was the man I thought he was. He is a dismissive avoidant with borderline or maybe full-blown abusive tendencies. He drinks multiple nights a week, can't hold on to a job for more than a year despite having a JD, and his temper and emotional outbursts has me grieving daily for giving my 2 beautiful and spirited daughters such an awful example of a partner as their father. I have failed them, and this kills me. They are innocent souls, and his miserable existence infects all of us. His emotional outbursts and temper have never escalated to the point where I would have hard evidence, but even if I did, the state I live in prefers fathers to have as much contact as possible with their children in the instance of divorce. He has gotten in my face twice, the first when I was 7 months pregnant with my second child, with his chest puffed and fists clenched, and through gritted teeth has told me you're really pushing me whenever we get into an intense discussion or argument. I have stumbled backwards each time, otherwise he would have bumped right into me or knocked me over. One morning this past May, after a horrendous argument, he stormed down the hallway into our bedroom and said nothing but yanked my clothing away and turned me around, pushed me onto the bed, and SA'd me. I was so shocked I completely froze. I still wonder if this is SA, but it wasn't loving or kind or even make-up intimacy. There was no consent, enthusiastic or otherwise. He was still furious with me after he was done. I remember trying to be quiet so that I wouldn't wake my 4-year-old in the other room because I did not want her walking in on this. I can't leave or divorce him because I have no evidence. I have no police reports, and I can't tell my family because I'm afraid of what they might actually do. I have no friends close enough to confide in about this. If I leave, my daughters will be forced to spend time with him for visitation, and my husband, being a spiteful man, would most likely fight for 50-50 custody, even though he barely spends time with them now, maybe 4 to 6 hours a week. I feel trapped into staying so that I can protect them. Since I am a stay-at-home mom now, I am with them all day, every day, and can shield them from him, but if I left, they'd actually end up forced to spend more time with him. Not only is he emotionally immature and the unhappiest creature I now know, he is generally not a safe person for them to be with. He is extremely forgetful, like forgetting to buckle seatbelts, will drive while falling asleep at the wheel, forgets to feed them or give them water, and I can't imagine what would happen to one or both of them during visitations. I am a prisoner in my own life, and I can't get past the guilt of completely failing my daughters and being stupid enough to be duped by this man. There were no warning signs. There were no red flags that I ignored. He simply and insidiously did a 180 over the years we have been married. As a child of divorce, I tried so hard to pick what I thought was a really good man. Instead, I am sentenced to a life with a monster to keep my daughters safe.